Welcome to CBR. Annie January is the only hero in the 7. But did you know Starlight was originally intended to be much different? Today, let's dive into Starlight in the Boys comics and TV show. Annie January is the only character in the Boys comics who is a soup and a true hero at the same time. And since the beginning, her arc is marked by her duality as Annie and Starlight. Annie's central conflict is between her own moral code and the decisions that Vought makes for her, due in part to her upbringing in which she has been guided to believe that her powers and superheroism are her true purpose. Starlight is what Vought has shaped Annie to be. She genuinely wants to do something positive with her powers, but to be Starlight, which is the only reality she knows, she often needs to ignore her own wishes and morality. This tension between Annie's morals and her role in Starlight leads her to become one of the most truly heroic characters within the Boys universe, within both the comics and in the television series. Starlight first appears in the comics in the 3rd issue as the 7's newest recruit. Before, she was a member of the Young Americans, a conservative team of younger heroes, before being chosen to replace Lamplighter in the 7. The very first scene with Annie in the comics features a disgusting situation. Homelander unexpectedly shows up to greet her. She's really excited to talk to Homelander and discuss her career as a superhero so far, but she soon finds out why he's there. Homelander drops his pants and demands oral sex. He is completely unfazed by her disgust and seems to do this kind of thing often. At first, Annie thinks someone might be mind-controlling Homelander. When A-Train and Black Noir show up, she asks for their help, but the two join in on Homelander's attack. They tell her this is the only way she can be in the 7. Having been raised to believe her only purpose is to be Starlight, Annie eventually allows the abuse. Annie does not leave the 7 after the attack occurs. Her first encounter with Queen Maeve is also awful. She idolized Maeve from a young age and immediately learned how rude her idol could be. Although Maeve would later be developed into an anti-hero, it would take a while for Maeve to warm up to Annie. Another rude awakening for Annie is being forced into wearing a new suit designed to show off her body. Coming from a religious conservative background, this feels unnatural to her. Vought and members of the 7 would continue to abuse Annie throughout the comics, but she starts to fight back. Starlight temporarily blinds A-Train in one of the scariest moments for her in this team full of rapists in The Boys number 22, 2008. During most of the comic series, Starlight is a member of the 7. Cherry, the second story in The Boys and the first in which she appears, starts off by setting the tone of her terrible experience in the team, but Cherry Part 3 introduces the real Annie January. In The Boys number 5, Huie and Annie meet at Central Park one day. He asks if she minds if he sits at the other end of the bench she is on. They start talking and become friends. They soon start dating, but neither realizes what the other does during the day in The Boys and the 7. When Annie finally confesses to being a superhero, Huie feels betrayed. He had learned with the Boys that soups can't be trusted, and Annie had lied about it. Butcher, however, already knew Annie's secret. He had seen footage of the 7, which Huie didn't care to do, and had already put the puzzle together when he saw Huie and Annie kissing in the street one day. Huie is manipulated by Butcher into watching footage of Starlight being abused by her team members. Having no context for what he witnessed, Huie breaks up with Annie. Butcher's plan works. This is a dark moment for both Huie and Butcher, since Annie was the victim in this situation. This moment also highlights how hard it is for victims of sexual assault to have their stories heard and their voices believed. In parallel to this forbidden romance, Annie goes through a lot with Vought and the 7. She discovers some of Homelander and Vaught's secrets, like their plan to control the government and how they kept the zombie-like reanimated corpse of Lamplighter in a cell. At one point, Vought executives force her to wear an even more revealing outfit. After trying it, she refuses and even goes back to wearing her original suit again in the final stories. She later tracks Huie down in his hometown, where they first get back together. However, Annie eventually leaves Huie because he can't forget the events he witnessed. Yet, they reunite and end up together. They move to Scotland and one day get married. Okay, we love a romantic happy ending, but let's rewind a bit and understand how Annie got to the 7 and that park bench where she met Huie. Most of Annie's origin story is revealed in the spin-off 6-issue series, The Boys Highland Laddie. When Annie follows Huie to Scotland to get him back, she tells him her life story. Annie was not simply born with powers, her birth was traumatic. Her light-based powers permanently blinded her parents and the doctors present when she was born. One of her biological parents must have taken Compound V, and they had no idea what they would have to deal with. Met with the challenge of raising Annie while disabled, they gave up the custody of their child over to Vought. The company placed her with foster parents who raised her to aspire to become a superhero. She frequently attended child superhero pageants, which were hunting grounds for Vought to spot their future recruits. This is how she eventually joined the Young Americans. They are a Vought American team of young adult heroes targeted at the religious and conservative demographic. Her dream was to join the Seven one day, like most supes. After being coerced into doing something she didn't want to do in exchange for her dream, Annie goes to Central Park to think about it all. That's when she meets Huie. She shares her frustration with her work without revealing what she does. In her first conversation with Homelander, Annie tells him she's dating Drummer Boy, the leader of the Young Americans. However, she would eventually learn Drummer Boy had been cheating on her with Holy Mary, another member of the team, the entire time. This is when she realized that her old team was just as bad as the Seven, but at least she was finally single to start dating Huie. Annie was raised in a very religious environment and was extremely sheltered, so it's through her relationship with Huie that Annie finally gets some sense of true freedom. For example, their first date is the first time she tries alcohol. Annie is the only good superhero in this universe, so it's like her powers are a beacon of light in the darkness. Her powers are directly tied to who she is and how she sees the world. They're so bright they can be blinding, literally and emotionally. Let's break down what she can do. Annie's signature ability is light projection. She can create intense bursts of light from her hands, but it's not just a flashlight. Starlight's light-based powers can be used as attacks. They're strong enough to blind both regular people and supes alike. A-Train learned that the hard way when he tried to assault her and she hit him with a flash so intense it burned one of his eyes and temporarily blinded him. She can fly. No need for gadgets or wings. She floats and lifts off with ease. She's also mentioned having pretty amazing hearing, though it takes a lot of focus. It's sharp enough to pick up changes in heartbeat and breathing, making her a kind of human lie detector if she wants to be. She has also soup-like durability. She may not be bulletproof in the most technical sense, but she's got an incredible resilience that's both physical and emotional. Before we move on to the TV version of Starlight, let's discuss a detail about the end of her arc in the comics. Then, we'll get into a few secrets about the creation of the character. We've mentioned the romantic ending she has with Huie when discussing her last moments in the series, but her arc really ends in a more complex way beyond the surface. After all, this is the universe of The Boys, and it had to end on a satirical note. In the final issues of The Boys, Annie and Huie get their apparent happy ending. The two rekindle their relationship, and the series closes on a hopeful note for them. Huie finally seems ready to be the kind of partner Annie deserves. But the aftermath of The Boys is further explored in the spin-off miniseries, The Boys Dear Becky. Set many years in the future, it shows how Annie and Huie are living in Scotland. After Homelander's attempted coup, all superheroes are banned. Readers learn that Annie is exiled, forced into retirement. She is under threat of execution should she ever use her powers again. Although she's one of the few characters who survives, there's a quiet sorrow that underlines her new life. Annie appears nostalgic, often lost in her thoughts. What once defined her as Starlight has faded. She's now confined to a quiet life in which she needs to be a new Annie, and her relationship with Huie is not a fairy tale. He lies to her to hide Butcher's diary, and he keeps postponing their wedding. This bittersweet ending brings her arc closer to Garth Ennis's original plans for Annie, which were much darker. In fact, Annie was not even intended to fall in love with Huie at first. In an interview with CBR by Keel Fegley back in 2012, The Boys writer Garth Ennis stated that he didn't plan for Huie and Annie to meet when he started writing Cherry, the story that introduces her. He included Starlight and Cherry, with plans of making her a character who's initially good, but would slowly but surely be corrupted by the Seven. He initially imagined her as a character who would be forced into doing more and more degrading acts, as an exploration of how far people go to secure a spot at the top. However, Ennis said that he suddenly found himself wanting her to go in a new direction. She should be stronger and more nuanced, since so many other characters were already deeply corrupted. As he was writing the scene where Huie is feeling sad at Central Park, he imagined Annie doing the same, and so he turned it into the scene when they meet for the first time. Ennis admitted, "I probably felt a bit guilty about Annie and ended up treating her a bit more responsibly as a result." That was an essential realization by the writer in order to make The Boys what it is. Annie is the heart of the comic series, representing the disillusionment of realizing the inner workings of a rotten industry. She is the only character who can see both sides of the comic's reality, how images are carefully crafted, and she can also actively stand up to it and fight for authenticity. If she were how Ennis had initially planned her to be, she would be a part of the problem. Unfortunately, victims can become enablers. That could be realistic as well, but not nearly as exciting as the strong hero that Annie ended up becoming. This is something that Eric Kripke, the creator of the show, definitely saw in Annie, and it's probably why the TV version of the character is even stronger. Annie is introduced in the Amazon Prime Video TV show The Boys in a similar way to her comics counterpart, although a few details of her time joining the Seven are not the same. The most notable difference is that the initial abuse she suffers at the hands of her team members is slightly less horrific. Instead of being cornered by three men like in the comics, it is only the Deep that forces himself upon Annie when she arrives. After that, Annie's arc has followed a similar tone as her comics version, being the only decent person within Vought and Huie's complex love interest. However, TV Annie is more present in the plot. She evolves into a double agent, helping the boys to take down Homelander and Vought International. Annie's origin story is also altered for TV. Instead of her parents bringing her over to Vought, who then placed her with foster parents in the Bible Belt, TV Annie grew up with her biological parents. Since the whole plot twist surrounding Compound V is treated differently in the TV show than it is in the comics, Annie's origin story needed to be changed as well. She did attend pageants for child soups, but that was her own biological parents' idea. They had her injected with Compound V as a child, hoping their kid would become special. However, they never told her the truth, so Annie grew up believing she was born with powers. Another thing that puts her closer to the source material is the fact that she also attended religious events like Capes for Christ while growing up. By the way, her powers are pretty similar to comics, but with a cool twist in season 3 that we'll mention in a moment. As a young girl, Annie joined the Young Americans. She dated Drummer Boy, who would become supersonic. Later on, she's selected for the Seven following Lamplighter's apparent retirement. She's incredibly happy at first, but when she's coerced into performing a sexual act on the Deep, she's left humiliated and angry. As in the comics, the Deep's attack on her becomes a defining moment. This abruptly shifts her worldview as she begins to see all the incoherence within Vought. Despite her earnest belief in the power of superheroes and the good they bring to the world at the beginning of her time in the Seven, she quickly begins to see the dark side that had been hidden from the public's view. So, even though she accepted wearing the new outfit, she eventually began to challenge Vaught's directives. For that, she faced backlash from her employers and team members. The Believe Expo marks an important moment in the character's development when she expresses her anger at Vought and the world in public. She exposes the attack upon her, while leaving out the Deep's name, despite a great deal of pressure on her to just read the teleprompter and go along with Vought International's plans. Another important aspect of her arc in Season 1 is the beginning of her relationship with Huie. The show understands how far-fetched it was in the comics to have them oblivious to each other's day job for so long, so Huie knows who she is and Annie learns about the boys early on. But their dynamic of keeping secrets from each other and that being a problem remains. Huie gets closer to Annie to plant a bug, but they quickly develop a relationship. She becomes suspicious of him when he asks for tickets to the Believe Expo, and soon finds out he's in the boys. Season 2 is marked by the roller coaster of emotions between the couple, her feud with Stormfront, and the instability of her position in the Seven. Season 3 then puts Starlight at the top of her game. She's appointed co-captain of the Seven with Homelander. She decides to take the position despite the risks of being closer to Homelander. At this point, Annie and Huey's relationship is public, which brings new challenges for the couple to navigate alongside Annie's changing role within the Seven. Annie's ex-boyfriend, Supersonic, joins the Seven, but soon, Homelander kills Supersonic just to prove to Annie that he would kill Huie if she steps out of line. However, Annie's breaking point comes in Season 3, Episode 6, Herogasm. Annie is against the boys teaming up with Soldier Boy, especially after Soldier Boy's rampage leaves many characters dead or injured. She's done with playing dirty, so she quits the Seven, calls out Homelander on social media, and tells the public the truth about Soldier Boy. Season 3 ends with Annie's coolest display of her powers so far. Annie has the ability to enhance her powers from an external power source, a feature unique to the TV version. In the finale, Huie turns on all the studio lights to supercharge Annie. After the fight, Annie officially joins the boys. She becomes a public symbol of opposition to Homelander. Annie's role in Season 4 is marked by her temporarily losing her powers and being replaced by the Shifter, a soup with the ability to change their appearance to look like anyone. The Shifter holds Annie captive for 10 days while impersonating her within the boys, even proposing to Huie to throw off his suspicions. However, Annie breaks free before the Shifter can kill President Robert Singer. At the end of the season, Homelander finally comes into power after Robert Singer is framed for murder, leaving the Speaker of the House, Stephen Calhoun, to become the president. However, Calhoun merely acts as a puppet for Homelander's plans. Huie and Annie flee, but Vought arrests him while she manages to escape by flying away. This is the last thing we know about her. Now, what do you think awaits Annie in The Boys Season 5? Let's discuss in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. Until next time, thanks for watching CBR.